Hi everybody and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about a concept which I call the autopilot phase in language learning. Um, I find this to be very, very interesting, and let me explain to you what I mean by the autopilot phase of language learning. When we start learning a language, there are different phases that we go through. In the beginning, when it depends on what kind of language you're learning, whether you know the alphabet or you don't know the alphabet, how much vocabulary you have already. So in the beginning, it might not be that intensive because you're just learning the absolute basics and all that. And as you continue to learn, it becomes more and more challenging. You have to give it more time, and you have to the amount of vocabulary that you're studying, that increases. And so there comes a time when you make enough progress, you get to a point which I call the autopilot phase. And what do I mean by that? Imagine that it doesn't matter how you're learning that course, whether you are attending a face-to-face course or an online course, or if you're doing self-study like I do. I've studied all of my languages via self-study by using different programs and apps and textbooks and all that. There comes a time when you finish the most important stuff, what you consider to be important. For example, if there's a book which has like 100 lessons and you finish those 100 lessons, or if there's a certain website which has a number of modules and you finish those modules, or if you're doing a face-to-face course which has 2-month courses, and they have like 4 of those or whatever, and you finish those. Regardless of how you get to that phase, but you come to a point where the actual structured learning has taken place. Obviously, if you want to continue down the same route, you can buy more advanced books and more advanced courses and all that. But that all depends on just what your target proficiency is. If you're somebody like me who wants to have a reasonable proficiency level, which allows you to communicate with native speakers, I don't know, B1, B2 level, C1, maybe even for on the CEFR. C1 is a little bit on the higher side for basic communication, but yeah, okay. Once you get there, after that, your learning doesn't stop. You go into the autopilot phase. What do I mean by that? Every time you watch a video in your target language, or every time you speak to a native speaker, or every time you read a book, you're getting input. You're learning new words. And even if you're not learning new words, the words that you already know are already being recycled. And you're exposed to new grammatical structures. And let's not forget the concept of the active vocabulary and grammar and passive vocabulary and grammar. What do I mean by that? Just because we don't use a word doesn't mean we don't know it. Research shows that pretty much everybody's active vocabulary is much more limited. We use a certain number of words, a few thousand, but we know a lot more. Now, we don't get the opportunity to use them in real life, but we still know them whenever we see them in text or whenever somebody uses them in a conversation. So yeah, and the reason I always talk about the autopilot phase of language learning is because, a lot of people, they panic when they're learning languages and when they have to, go through this routine of grammar exercises and very structured lessons, and actually physically having to travel to go to a classroom, or, even attending a class online or doing modules like in a structured course. It feels very, very, tiresome. It could be tiresome for some people. And we ask ourselves how long can I continue this? The good news is you don't have to push yourself hard. Some people, they actually enjoy the whole process. If you're one of those people, well, you're lucky. You don't have to worry about anything. But if you're like me, like after a while, I don't want to put the same amount of energy that I was having to put into the process, like actively every day. It's nothing to worry about. Once you attain a certain level of proficiency, then you just have to interact with the language, with authentic materials in whichever situation that you want to. In my case, it's interacting with native speakers or watching videos on topics that I enjoy. And here's another beautiful thing. A lot of times when I just, my curiosity knows no bounds. There are times when for example, I want to understand the dynamics of lion prides, what happens inside a pride of lions. Or sometimes I want to watch a documentary about whales and what they eat and their digestive system and that kind of stuff. So instead of watching it in English, I watch it in one of the other languages. And that does two things for me. On the one hand, like I'm satisfying my curiosity of, getting information about that stuff that I was curious about. On the other hand, I'm also getting practice in one of my languages. Now, it all depends on how complicated the topic is and how proficient I am in different languages and which language I would watch it in. But yeah, so in real life, like interacting with the language, your beautiful learning journey will continue. You'll continue to either, improve your level as you interact with the language in that autopilot phase, or at least at the very least, you'll be able to maintain whatever it is that you have. So yeah, hang in there and get to your required level and then let the autopilot phase take over. Thanks for watching, and please like the video if you liked it. If you didn't like it, let's just keep that our little secret, and I'll see you in the next one.